all the quizzes, steady work, maybe even a little improvement, and both of you came up with 89.3. Now what am I supposed to do? I mean, is life really that black and white that if you get an 89.3 you get a B? Well, it could be. Of course, if you're sitting at 89.3, you don't want it to be. I understand that. I was at 2.98, and University of California, Berkeley said, of course, that was their mission statement. They had a right to say that. So we look at the information. We look at it as it applies to individuals. We look at effort. We look at talents. We look at a whole plethora of things. And then a decision has to be made. Now, the reason I'm saying that, look, none of this is black and white, people. We want it to be that way. And when it is that way, and you benefit, you run the flag up the flagpole and everybody's happy. But it doesn't work that way. We don't live in that world. So we have to find ways then to massage the system. How do we massage the system? Does everybody follow what I'm talking about? Okay. So that brings us to Ronald Dworkin then. Ronald says he's a rights-oriented legal professor, addresses the objection to affirmative action by arguing that the use of race in affirmative action policies doesn't violate anybody's rights. This takes us back to the mission statement of the college. The college has a right to locate itself somewhere within society and say, this is what we want to produce. How many of you would want to go work for Google? Anybody? Google workers? Google's really amazing. My boy works for LinkedIn. They had Parents LinkedIn Day. That really blew me away. I flew up to Chicago and I walked in and I thought, this looks like Google. Everybody's standing up. Like they would have a whole section over here, you know, no walls. They have these little, and people are standing up. They have their desks. Some stand up at those Veridesk things, and some are sitting down. They're all walking around with their head things. And my boy's up in the front, and I said, "Is this your group?" He says, "No, my group is somewhere else in the building." I said, "You're not connected." He says, "Oh, we're always connected to the group. This gives us a little bit more free." This is just like Google. I thought, wow. They're investing in performance, not uniformity. Wow, this is really interesting. Well, how do you get to work at Google? Well, they send you out a math problem. It's called an logarithm to see if you know math. And if you pass it, they go, okay, now we'll give you a real logarithm, which most of us would fail to start with, the first one. And then if you pass the second one, they go, wow, maybe you're a candidate for Google. Now we'll give you the hard one. And if you pass it, they hire you. Bill Gates used to hire people strictly on the IQ test. He said, I don't care if you know anything about computers, you're smart enough, I can teach anything I want. I learned computers on my own. You could learn anything you want, people. You do not have to be in the classroom to get smart. But this is where you learn some of the skills you need so you can go to the next level and teach yourself, where you make use of the people around you who have some skill sets that you can use to enhance your own education. So even out there in the real world, it's not black and white, people. That's how we have to try and decide what it is. So Dworkin says, well, it depends on the institution, whether it's academic, whether it's a work institution, whether it's a plant like a car manufacturing plant. It depends on what, you know, if you go to a Chevy plant, do not build a Ford Escape. Everybody's got a mission statement. They have something they're trying to produce, whether it's intelligent people, minds, engineers, whatever it is. So Dworkin says affirmative action, the wiggle room we need, has to be based, the foundation of it begins with university's mission statement. What are they about? And if you want to be about what they're about, then you apply. And if you meet the standards, and the standards are always a window, people. We talked about this on Tuesday. If that's the window, and you fit into the window, then you have an opportunity to belong there. Now, if the mission statement has a social purpose to it, and it's inclusive and not exclusive, the Supreme Court, ethics equals what? The law. The Supreme Court has said as long as the social purpose is inclusive and not exclusive, it is not only allowed to have a window of opportunity, it can base it on ethnicity, gender, social status, economic status. It's allowed to do this as long as it's inclusive rather than exclusive. And if you fit the criteria, you have an opportunity to fit in. with the opportunity to fit in, you can make yourself a benefit of what they offer. Maybe wealth, a job, whatever that benefit might be. Everybody understand that? So, what Dworkin says then is affirmative action works, but it doesn't work as a black and white kind of schemata. The mission statement defines who it is, the greatest happiness for the greatest number, and they are admitting they have a social purpose. They want to reflect the community. We want to. That's why we have open enrollment. There is no exclusion here. It's everybody can come if they want to. If you fail, that may be because K through 12 they didn't give you the right tools or whatever that might be. And by the way, right now, how do I say this? In many ways, the educational society, or the educational part of society, has set some of you up for failure because you're told without a higher education you won't succeed. There are high schools now that are being turned back into vocational schools because you can make really good money. I know a fellow who is an underwater welder. Dwayne Pretzer, well, I haven't remembered his name in a long time. Very dangerous. You're in the helmet, you're underwater, and you're doing welding. He retired when he was 35. He learned it in the Navy. In fact, we just started a welding program, and I went up to the dean who's got it, and I said, have you thought of underwater welding yet? Well, there's not enough support in the community yet. And I said, well, there is. There's a fellow down in Tarpon Springs, and he's an underwater welder, and he would love a protege. He would love to teach that to someone. Very dangerous people. I mean, let's add everything together when we think about, oh, big money. It is very dangerous. It's an opportunity. I was in California when I had my last Porsche. I went to California and I was having some problems with it. I didn't realize when I changed the clamp on the muffler that it was tapping up against the frame. Every time I made a right-hand turn, it would go tap, 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 tap. And I thought, what the heck is wrong with this? I mean, a Porsche shouldn't be wrong at all. So when I got to San Francisco, I stopped in a Porsche garage. It's owned by a German fella, and he's got 12 lifts, and only 3 of them have cars on them. 2 of the kids learning how to do brakes and learning how to do air conditioning, and one of them is a master mechanic, so I got chatting with him. And I said, what's it like to work for this? We call it, this is a negative term, I call him Conrad for German. He says, well, this is my last year I'm going to work for him. I said, why? So I'm a master mechanic. He says, every time, now this is back in '78, he says, every time one of these lifts goes up, Conrad gets $50 and I get 16. He says, why am I giving Conrad $34 for my labor? I thought, oh, I like the way you think. So I went up to the boss and I said, so I have a master's degree. I can learn whatever I want to. I'm interested in learning Porsches. If I moved from Michigan, made a total commitment to come to San Francisco and work for you, would you teach me how to work on Porsches? He said, oh yeah, we start you at brakes, we do cooling, we do air conditioning, this. And after a couple of years, I'd be a master mechanic, and then I'd say, see ya, and go start my own shop and get $50 every time the thing goes up in the air. How many of you would like to make $50 an hour? But you have to be a mechanic. You have to put the time in to learn it. So what I'm saying to you is the educational system these days says, oh, without a college degree, you can't make money. That's not true. There's a lot of ways to make money in trades, vocations, as well as education. Everybody follow? Depends on what the mission statement is. Dworkin has a really strong point to make. But what happens if we have more people qualified than we have places? That's where the rub is. So on Tuesday we said, well, academic excellence ought to be the key that opens the door at the end. That should be the only thing that should be rewarded. You work hard for an A, why shouldn't you get an A? And why shouldn't the A be the standard by which you're judged if you're going to an academic institution? Well, the problem is the institution doesn't agree with you. And Dworkin says, therefore, you have no right to be accepted just because you're talented in a certain area. If your skill set matches the mission statement, then the opportunity is there, and that's all you're guaranteed is an opportunity. They may go through it and say, well, we have enough Caucasians, we have enough African Americans, we have enough Hispanics, Asians, whatever it is. And that's their right as long as it's inclusive rather than exclusive. Everybody get that? No questions? Test is Sunday? No? Okay. Okay. So let me move from him then. I'll move to Postman. Now, I tried to get this thing to open. It's a PowerPoint, so I'm going to show you the what we call the e-maze one that goes through the museum. Before I do that, I have to point out Postman's going to offer 2 definitions for affirmative action. One of them is wrong. Strong affirmative action is right, defined as preferential treatment discriminating in favor of members of underrepresented groups which have been treated unjustly in the past and against innocent people. It's happened. We just have to accept that fact. Then he says the definition of weak affirmative action as opposed to strong is to seek to promote equal opportunity to the goods and offices of society. This is really meritocracy. Weak affirmative action is really meritocracy. They're not the same. He's trying to make an argument, so he's going to distinguish between strong and weak for him is really meritocracy. You work hard, you deserve the deserts of your effort, moral deserts. It's based on treating people as ends that are invaluable, beyond value, and not as a means to some social purpose. And you are protected by due process and equal protection. So this is at the heart of Postman's argument. Now he's going to bring up rationale for affirmative action. He's going to have counter proposals. Some of them work, but they also have downsides. Everything has an up, everything has a downside. So you understand the difference between strong and weak affirmative action? If you see a question on that, you have to be able to distinguish between the two. Weak affirmative action applies to Postman, not to Dworkin. And if the strong affirmative action definition is this definition, it applies to Postman. Do not get those two confused. That's where you end up losing points, people. So the first one that he presents to us is this. Strong affirmative action, and then arguments for strong affirmative action are this. The need for role models argument. How many of you have mentors? Any of you know what a mentor, you know what mentors are? Mentors are people who influence your life. Sometimes you don't realize it till you've gone past them and you go forward in life, you go, wow, you know, that was really someone, that person really was I got 5, I have 2 women, I have 3 men in my life. Sometimes you see them coming, sometimes you seek them out, but oftentimes you see them only in reflection of the past. And they're very instrumental and influential on your lives. And we know that works for people. Life doesn't come with a roadmap. What do I do next? I can tell you what I did, but I don't know if that's going to work for you. And once in a while we find people just seem to be built with wisdom that works for us. Even over the years, you might call them years later. My first one is named Paul Scheel. He was my first professor in undergraduate school. He worked for President Kennedy before President Kennedy was assassinated. Then he went to work for Sunita Oneonta. Paul was brilliant. I loved being around that man. He was so instructive for my life. Then I had to do 3 years in the military. And when I come out, I go back to this town. I just want to reminisce with some people. And it turns out he's just left his house, and I come up behind him. And as I'm walking up to him, and he's walking this way, I said, "Hey, Paul, how are you doing?" And he stops, doesn't turn around. He goes, "I know that voice." And he mentions my name, and he turns around and he looked at me, and I thought, wow, that's weird. 3 years out of circulation and you remember my voice. That was the connection we had made with one another. And in undergraduate school, he was Paul and I was Larry. He's a superior. Everybody follow what I'm saying? That's the relationship that mentors build. So one of the arguments for strong affirmative action is the need for role models. That's indisputable. People need role models. Postman's response, though, is it's more important for role models to be good than to be of a particular race, ethnicity, or gender. Well, yes, that's true, but not really. Sometimes we make connections with people because they're like us. The door just seems to open. Wow, you come from the hood too? Wow, what was life like when you went here and you went there and da-da-da-da-da? Or females make connections. You see these commercials now, you see a lot of famous women, and after it's all over, they were all Girl Scouts. They found leadership skills. They were led by leaders, and those skills were imparted to them just through spending time around those people. So yes, we all need role models, and it's important to have good ones. By the way, bad ones can lead you right down the path into destruction. But sometimes it's important to have people you can relate to and you can connect with. So